Hi, my name is Margaret, and welcome to my artsy corner of the internet. Okay, so for once, I think I might not actually be like super far behind the current trends. Usually I get to things like a year after they're popular, but this time I'm only gonna be like a week behind. I'm pretty proud of myself. Jimin from BTS just released Set Me Free Part 2. If there's a Part 1, I don't know it. Please don't hate me. I try my best. Usually my best is only like adequate. But I think that we should just get straight into reacting to the music video. Let's go. I need to move this so I can see better. Don't you dare play an ad. I was so excited and then it played a freaking ad. I don't want to watch an ad.
Introducing Grammarly site.
Okay. Oh, I love the music. I'm gonna cry. Actual tears. Why is it so cool? Oh, and he's not moving in the middle. Where'd he go? Oh, there he is. I found him. Oh, they're in a spiral, and they were spiraling around him earlier. Jimin, do you need another backup dancer? The use of all of the dancers is so good. Also, his high notes right now are kind of killing it too. What just happened? She just moves so fast. So many movements, so little time. He has the New York Times logo. Isn't that the same font as the New York Times? I might also just be crazy. I am crazy, actually. They're on people. Sorry. Oh, the use of lights is so effective too. Oh, I'm having a whole experience. Somebody set him free. Set him free. Oh, those were the classiest, swaggiest pelvic thrusts I've ever seen. Ha, huh, 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 huh. Huh? Y'all, I'm not okay. I'm never okay when I watch Jimin dance, but I'm like really not okay. I did tear up at the beginning. I have been overly emotional all day. I think I've already cried like thrice, but the reason why I love Jimin so much is because it's very clear that he has a kind of contemporary background in his movement style, but also I feel like all of his choreographies fuse the more classical contemporary-ish aesthetic with the more trendy current like hip-hop aesthetic, and I feel like that's something that you don't often see, especially in the K-pop genre, is that like flair of classical technique. And I keep on saying classical because there's a lot of different classical dances and all different kinds of cultures and traditions, but when I say like classical, I mean like ballet, contemporary, modern. But the fusion of aesthetics, I guess, is something that is so prominent and poignant in Jimin's solo work. I think specifically, think back to like the different solos he's done, like the Black Swan, and I think that's like the main one where he's really let his contemporary kind of show. And while a lot of movement in this is very hip-hop based, there's so much of like the aesthetic of more classical things. And I don't know, I think there's also just like a very vulnerable sense in all of his movement. A lot of K-pop dances are very emotional, at least a lot of BTS's are very emotionally driven. My brain isn't working. There's a sense of vulnerability in all of these pieces. I love it. There's just like a specific aesthetic that Jimin has cultivated in his own dance technique, and it resonates into his music and his solo projects and his personal style. And there's just something so powerful, which I think you kind of get from like the heavier hits and the more hip-hop element, where it's like it feels gritty and passionate and strong and powerful and all that kind of stuff, but then fusing that with like a little bit more classical vulnerability, but also dramatic, lyrical. I think also you have a lot of really nice moments where just like the image of the dancers is really strong. So it's not all focused on like movement and momentum and dance steps, but there's a lot of moments where like just like if you like the screenshot, like the image created in that moment is super powerful, like with the hands all reaching, and a lot, I don't know, fascination with the hands. Oh, we're back. Anybody who's been here for like a year knows these little guys, I like hands. But the hands are very expressive, and I think that that's a trend right now in contemporary dance, to have like a lot of like introspection in the hands, and I kind of see that in here. Anyway, we should start watching this again from the beginning, because I've already been talking for who knows how long, because it was so good. That hair is probably gonna bug me in post. We haven't even started the replay yet, but oh my gosh, I love this opening. First of all, the beginning with like the opera voices. I love a good classically inspired composition. I love opera, I love strings, I love piano, I love it all. So when I hear like a beautiful opera a cappella harmony, it's so good. And also just like emotionally powerful, I think, also with so many bodies in the space and so many bodies performing in what I could describe as like raw and organic, both in movement style but also in approach and performance. It doesn't feel like this is a performance, even though it very much is. It feels like the performers are tapping into being a human to express instead of cloaking themselves in something else to perform, and that is very touching. Anyway, I love it's so good, because you already feel this sense of like agony, and also facial expressions crazy good by all the backup dancers as well. I think sometimes backup dancers, that's what I'm calling them, because that's what we typically call this body of workers. Maybe I should call them like the core. The core is what we call like the group of dancers in ballet, and I feel like maybe they're more of like a core de ballet than backup dancers, because I think they're intrinsic to this performance. Like you can't have this without all of them, so to call them just like backup feels sometimes inadequate, but I shall use that term because it's the only term I have right now. But sometimes it feels like when you have backup dancers, they're meant to back up, be like faceless moving bodies to spotlight the other main focus on stage. But I feel like I see the individuality of all of these performers, and that is something that I think adds to the emotional impact that I feel. And the fact that they're all moving, having this individual experience, and then all together it's like agonizing gestural movements that they're doing isn't even enough anymore. That like this shake comes out of like, I can't physically express it any way more. Like I can't express words right now because I'm like feeling that energy. And I think I've said this before, but any dance performer who can make me like physicalize something by just doing it on screen, like I'm not even in the same room with them, and like watching them move is like making me mimic the physicality that they're doing. And it's so good. It's so good. Anyway, props to all of these dancers. It's also the use of like these chaotic individual stories that each of these dancers are telling, in how it snaps between that individual chaos to a group collective, almost acknowledging the individuality within a whole. It's stunning, and obviously it's very impactful and moving, because I think it's a very human experience to be a part of a whole, a part of a group and a community, but also have these internal monologues and stories that we're all going through. And it's just relayed very nicely, even though it's like, it feels like agony. The dance is conveying the sense of agony, not that like I feel agony watching this. I love watching this. So clean. I think again that it's the same sense of like very strong power. Also the music here is chef's kiss, but again that in internal chaos and agony, and then being channeled directly into this huge unison piece, that contrast is crazy. Crazy. Apparently that's my word of the day. I also feel like I have to acknowledge, if we go back real quick, the fact that they are rotating this while keeping that formation, that's actually really hard. It tricked me, at least the first time I watched this. It's like, oh yeah, simplicity, because everything is kind of stripped down in its essence. We have like very geometric backdrop, I guess geometric linear, but then it's in a circle, so that's kind of contrasting in like the set design. And then they're in a geometric grid pattern formation wise, and they're also turning, and then the camera's turning, so it is kind of like a vortex feeling, which they reference later with a spiral, but it's also contrasting it with these like geometric points. So it's kind of nice to see how the choreography also mimics the environment. All that being said, is that the environment is still pretty stripped down, and I think the choreography also kind of gives this illusion of simplicity, even though breaking it down, like actually turning that formation together while doing those dance steps would be really difficult. But it almost feels like some of that movement is negated by the movement of the camera as well, kind of following them. So it gives this air of simplicity when it's actually a lot of complexities and moving parts. I think it's also really fascinating. We're only 42 seconds into this, y'all. We just went from big, powerful movements, what we call a far kinesphere, where our limbs are far away from like the center core of our body. And now we're getting much more into a smaller kinesphere, where instead of going all the way out here to the edges of our reaches, we are now in a more internal place. It's really interesting how they keep the same power within those. You don't feel a drop of energy because we're coming from a far kinesphere where they're moving very large to a smaller kinesphere. And one of that's probably camera angle is also zooming in so we can see more intricacies, but there's also the amount of staccato, like a punctuation with each of these movements is definitely helping keep that energy up. And also just the intentionality of the dancers not letting these big moves feel more powerful than the smaller moves, allowing each of those to speak for themselves and show power in a different way. I think also talking about power, we can generate power with these very wide, hard-hitting movements that are fast and big and explosive and virtuosic, but we can also express power through these smaller, more staccato, I don't know why I said it like that, through these smaller gestural staccato movements as well. I think also the use of so many dancers in a space also generates a lot of power, to the point where I love this just happened. Having that juxtaposition also of da, ha, hua, hua. It's just a breath, but when you have everybody in unison there, that collective experience also generates a lot of power as a viewer. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where they're kind of referencing like that spiral. I love it too, because the backup dancers were spiraling around Jimin in the beginning. They're playing with the same concept of spiraling around Jimin. They manifested in two very different ways. One of them is a grid rotating around with everybody in unison and Jimin in the middle. And now it's like a literal spiral, almost like a maze inside. And I also love how Jimin is not necessarily super spotlighted. Clearly he is the soloist in this instance, but it feels like he's a member of the group that is contrasting or going against the flow, but not necessarily like a soloist outside of the group. And I think costuming and color scheme kind of has to do with that, which is why the end is so beautiful. Not to spoil it, even though we already all saw it. But yeah, there's something, I don't know, like the story of this intrigues me. Is everybody in this piece like trying to be set free, but Jimin's like the only one who's cognitively understanding that? Like, is everybody trapped, or are these people trapping him? Or is it both, where they're all trapped, yet because they don't know that they're trapped, they're holding Jimin back? Complexities. It's making me think. My brain is tired, but I want to know. I love dances that make me think about story and so good. Okay, sorry. It's that same spiraling in different configurations, but also having the two sides creep in. It's very like predatory, kind of puts you on edge. Oh, sorry, we literally made it a second. Hands, the expression, this sense of yearning that we get from the tension, but also the reaching, but not just like reaching like, look at this, I'm a happy peasant girl in a ballet and I'm reaching. It's like this bound energy that's like, I cannot continue. It's almost like there's energy flowing this way outward from the hand, but also another energy that's like pulling backwards. And that dichotomy of energy usage gets you like this, that yearning feeling. And it's almost like that emotional feeling of like wanting to go, but wanting to stay, physicalized into the form of wanting to reach, but also not wanting to, that gets like this tension in your body that eventually will kind of radiate into that we feel at the beginning with like that just harvesting of energy that you don't know what to do with. And I think that that's a very physically emotional thing that we can understand, that can just shown beautifully through this dance. And I think that's why you can kind of viscerally feel it. I also love that the lights there, I think, definitely add a whole nother level of performance. But in that moment, Jimin specifically as the soloist, he has these moments of just full release. And as we were talking about, that like bound up energy of the wanting to go, wanting to stay, that is the movements of Jimin being like releasing upwards while he's also singing Set Me Free. It's like that, I almost want to say like in movies when they have like the vision of like what it could be, like the dreamy haze of somebody like running through a field, like and then it like cuts back, hard stop to like reality, which is usually like very harsh. That sense of having all this bound up energy and then having one of the dancers allow that to actually, that energy to be free and not be bound up within the body. Beautiful. I feel like we're talking about power and energy. The backup dancers are moving, they're grooving, and there's something about the simplicity and the intentionality of Jimin's movements. He's not just bringing his hands down. There is something else happening with all the chaos and the controlled and beautiful chaos, but with all the chaos happening around him with the lights and the other dancers, that those moments of just subtly, slowly moving are this like grounding force that really all comes down to Jimin's performance and his use of his muscles and his use of his gaze, focus, performance, intentionality, all these different things, and honestly dance technique that gives him the power to harness all the energy and all of the nuance of what his body is conveying to simplify and still have it be profound. Because sometimes in dance it's actually a lot easier to do very quick, very hard movements, because that is where the value of that lies. If you're doing very hard, quick things, the value of that is it being hard and quick. Whereas when you slow it down, you're doing something very slow and simple, you have to find the power and the meaningfulness of those movements within those movements. You know, you can't put your leg behind your head. You know, that's pretty impressive, but how do you make something simple hold that same amount of meaning to the audience and to yourself as well? You know, when I talked about earlier how it kind of felt predatory with the two people coming in, oh my goodness, I feel like Jimin's in the middle, swirling, two predatory sides are coming in. We all remember that point? Cool. I feel like now the viewer is put into the same position as where Jimin is, where they're charging forwards. It's so good. I also just love it when dancers travel, especially in like whole groups, like just charge at me, please. Makes me feel something. The lighting design there is fantastic. Whoa, ah. The change in tone is well done. And they also do a good job at changing the flow of the dance. We've had a couple themes that have continued to kind of come up within the choreography of the first half. So to change to like this blue tinted lighting, obviously costuming, but also have this now small select group of dancers dancing in the front with this very, very fire choreography, honestly. And then have this background atmosphere created by the other dancers in the shot. Really great. I love the little spasm on the floor. I missed that the first time, and then the second time I was like, what just happened? I love it. Again, like that individual chaos happening within this context is really interesting. And yeah, I mean, they're just killing it in the front too. Not much more to say about that. Although their musicality in the front is impeccable. All of these gestural hits, I guess, it's a lot of, well, no, it's not really a whole lot of upper body, but my eye is drawn towards the upper body because of how in sync the arms are with the music. It feels like the music is coming from their bodies, not they are dancing to the music. Unless if you're intentionally trying to go against the music to create some kind of dissonance, having that synchronicity is so beautiful. I love how this section, it cuts back from like the blue tinted lighting, but also just with like these two people standing up in the low light. It's like, it takes you a second to be like, what is happening, right? Because we've established that there's no set pieces, there's no props. This is like seemingly all one camera shot. So we know what exists in this world, in this atmosphere. To see four people just grow tall, you're like, whoa, what just happened? Because it's kind of a confusing place to be in, because you're like, I know what was there. Now there's people who are taller. So, and also because it's in like low, almost silhouetted light, you're like, whoa, what is happening? It takes you a second to even like realize what has just happened, which is a great way to tonally shift the piece. Crazy, crazy, crazy. I'm in love with this. I didn't even realize that they pointed. Oh my gosh, it's straight back to when the four people were circling him earlier and we had the two groups coming in. The point that I referenced earlier. So good, guys. Oh, and you saw the people were coming. I love this part because it feels like everybody, all the core dancers, are back into like this clockwork. Earlier I thought this, but I didn't say it out loud, but it feels like everybody, you know, cog in the machine, you know, the typical saying of everybody's kind of like doing their thing, they're working, not really thinking much about it. And then Jimin he's the wrench. You're throwing a wrench in the whole thing. That's Jimin. You know, maybe a wrench needs to be thrown every once in a while. And it feels like this one, it's like you just had this whole interlude. Things are happening. People are standing on other people. And then all of a sudden it just cuts back and everybody's doing the thing that they're supposed to do. They're doing this very mechanical work, and even though, like, especially the people on the ground, it like feels emotional to be down there. It feels like desperate. There's something almost clinical about it because everybody is so in unison in these 3 lines, harnessing like this like mechanical energy. And then you have Jimin in the middle, who again is harnessing not this like mechanical energy, but this very human, emotional energy that he is conveying through relatively simple movements. But there's something very organic about him, very raw, vulnerable. I keep on saying these words, but it's because it's what's coming up, and everybody else is in this very kind of rhythm. And so they're both harnessing this different kind of energy, the dichotomy of it all. Cogs in a machine, clock ticking, Jimin in the middle. And then we're kind of back to this whole vortex. We're back to this whole vortex idea as well. Sorry, that took me so long to get those words out. But now the camera's spinning, not the dancers. And it's like, is this an emotional change for the rest of the core dancers? Is this it's a shift from the beginning when the dancers were swirling. Now they're still, and it almost feels more encouraging instead of combative. But is that only my interpretation? I think also having them be in a darker costume, so in like long sleeves, so that their hands are contrasted, everything else is a little bit darker, and then to just see those hands, really a beautiful image. There was another thing with hands that I reacted to that I really like hands. Also, I think the intricacy of Jimin having this moment where he is very introspective looking at his hands, and then having that be the thing that eventually is kind of used as an image literally like 2 seconds later with everybody else's hands is also really nice. Like, can you call it foreshadowing if it happens that soon after? I think so. I want to know how they edited that. I really love Jimin, y'all. It's official at this point. I mean, I think it was official before. I have nothing else to add. Just stunning. I hope to see you guys real soon so that we can gush about dance together. And yeah, bye.